Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the regular meeting of council. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On the roll, Councillor Carra,
I'm here.
Councillor Chabot,
Present.
Councillor Chu, Councillor Demong,
Present.
Councillor Dhaliwal,
Here.
Councillor McLean, I'm here. Councillor Meehan,
Here.
Councillor Penner,
Here.
Councillor Pootmans,
Here.
Councillor Sharp,
I'm here.
Councillor Spencer,
Here.
Councillor Walcott, Councillor Wong,
Here.
Councillor Winus.
Here.
Thank you, and Mayor Gondek.
I'm here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So we are kicking off with item 9.4.1, which is the Ward Boundary Commission report and recommendations. I want to thank your whole team for being so patient. We had a pretty important item to get through, and we're really grateful that you were able to let us do that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Terrific. Well, thank you, Mayor Gondek, members of administration, members of council. My name is Jordan Pinkster. I'm the chair of the Ward Boundary Commission. We're here this evening to present our final report. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment to reintroduce you to the commission members. The commission consists of 5 public members: Jacqueline Peterson, the vice chair; public members Dr. Jack Lucas, Elise Biche, and Karen Jang, as well as Andrew Brower from city administration in a non-voting capacity. This is a diverse group of passionate Calgarians who care deeply about the future of our city. Collectively, we come from political backgrounds, academic backgrounds, business backgrounds, and community-level backgrounds. I'm proud of the work this group has done over the last 9 months, and I'm grateful to work with so many terrific people. Today, I would like to provide you with an overview of our mandate, a summary of our project timeline, details about our engagement activities, and provide you with further context on our 16 recommendations. I would also welcome an opportunity to field your questions at the conclusion of this presentation. Overview of our mandate: we actually didn't get a chance to play with maps in this mandate, which was very confusing throughout most of our time together. The work of the Commission dates back to 2014, when a previous group led by former Mayor Al Doer considered the merits of adding additional councillors to this body. The decision from Council was to defer that conversation until after the 2021 election, and here we are today. As a Commission, we set out to answer one fundamental question: what does effective governance look like for members of Council? After 9 months of work, I'm here to tell you that I don't have a clue what that looks like, because it means something different to each one of you. All of you are placing different levels of priority on different aspects of the job, whether that be solving local ward level issues, setting policy and direction for broader civic level initiatives, or advocating to senior orders of government. The variance from office to office on those tasks is not a bug of this system, it is a feature. We recognize that you all have hard jobs, jobs that are getting harder. Over the last decade, Calgary has seen significant population growth. We've also faced a global pandemic, growing impacts from mental health and addiction challenges, and a housing and affordability crisis. All of this has put significant pressure on Calgarians, the corporation, you as an elected body, and your staff. It also isn't lost on the Commission that we're presenting this to you today when all of you might be a little bit distracted, and rightfully so. But this is kind of the point of this conversation. Despite the distractions, despite unforeseen circumstances, you all still have jobs to do. And this report is a reflection in terms of how we think those improvements could be made. Next slide, please. After being appointed in November, the Commission started our work in earnest in January of 2024. In January, Council approved our public engagement plan and project timeline. From March to June, our engagement activities were underway. Following the engagement, we began collating key themes and building out our draft recommendations. In July, we invited members of Council to an information session to provide feedback on our proposed recommendations, and that brings us before you today for our final presentation. Next slide, please. Our internal engagement was exhaustive. We spent time with every member of Council and their staff, including interviews with some former members of Council. We also spoke with members of the senior leadership team, the Ethics and Integrity Office, and various city departments and teams. We also conducted sessions with both the Calgary Board of Education and Calgary Catholic School District trustees and their senior leadership. Our goal was to understand initiatives that are already underway to support Council and better understand the cross-section between Council, administration, and other bodies. Next slide, please. We also spent a lot of time talking to Calgarians. As directed by Council, we look to better understand the public's expectations of all of you, what they want you to do more of, less of, or none of. This feedback played a critical role in shaping our understanding of that balancing point between your official roles and public expectations. The city's Engage portal had a general online questionnaire, and questionnaires specifically focused on business improvement areas, community associations, business associations, ethnocultural associations, and a variety of other interested parties. We also hosted a series of online workshops to have more direct conversations with those parties that I mentioned. Next slide, please. Our public engagement also extended to 5 pop-up events that we hosted across the city, where we invited members of the public to stop by and speak with members of our team. At each pop-up event, 2 engaged staff members and a member of the commission were available to explain the project and purpose of the event to those who stopped by, answer questions, and discuss the topics. Next slide, please. We recognize that this might not be the sexiest topic for a lot of people. This isn't building a park or a transit line or a roadway. This is something much more opaque. Despite that, the Commission was blown away by the level of engagement from Calgarians. Through 7 weeks of advertising, we had more than 8,000 visits to the Engage page, nearly 850 submissions to our online surveys, 11 organizations that attended our online workshops, and more than 80 Calgarians engaged across 5 in-person events. Next slide, please. From those conversations, we received feedback from Calgarians on what they expect of their councillors. Prominent themes include the need for meaningful two-way communication with their elected officials, the prioritization of constituents' wishes, concerns, and needs, the demonstration of good character, transparency, and integrity, and good financial stewardship with a focus on well-run city services. You can find a full breakdown of the public engagement, including verbatim comments from the public within your packages. Next slide, please. From our engagement activities, the Commission has made 16 recommendations that we have organized into 5 key themes. First, setting council members up for success, facilitating continuity, professional development, and training. We recognize elections are an important component of effective representation to keep elected officials accountable, but elections have an impact on a political office's ability to respond to the needs of their constituents. This section explores ways to improve continuity, professional development, and training opportunities for both councillors and their staff. Number 2, maximizing impact, building ward office capacity. Strong ward offices are a direct contributor to the overall effectiveness of a councillor. This section explores support structures for political staff and budget structures for ward offices. Number 3, mechanisms for democratic accountability, fostering effective representation. Calgarians play a high expectation on transparency and effective two-way communication with their elected leaders. This section explores tools to augment information sharing with members of the public. Number 4, knowing your ward, leveraging data to drive responsive decision-making. Well-informed councillors are in a better position to strongly advocate for their constituents. This section explores the development of research and engagement tools to give council a better understanding of local priorities and opinions on pressing issues. And lastly, future Commission considerations, including our review of the overriding policy for this body. Provincial legislation regarding the establishment of municipal political parties in Calgary may require deliberation from a future ward boundary commission. This section also does a deeper dive on the policy as a whole. Next slide, please. This exercise looked at how you as an elected body can rise to the challenges of the job and increase public pressure and scrutiny over your performance. This set of recommendations is intended to provide a menu of options for council's consideration. We want to give council an opportunity to begin a dialogue and consider modest investments and process improvements that could help them better serve their constituents and respond to the demands of this job. Recommendation number 1, that administration engage with council members' offices to prepare impartial administrative reference information before their term of office ends to support the transition and onboarding of newly elected councillors. Reference materials could include the status of ongoing constituent issues, major projects, and associated public consultations and key internal and external context, among other things. Transition binders are a commonplace at the provincial and federal levels of government. We see an opportunity to do something similar here. Recommendation number 2, that administration review programming for council's onboarding and continuous learning with input from council and their staff. Programming should include professional development and regular training offerings related to governance and financial stewardship, relevant municipal legislation, and constituency office leadership. We have heard that onboarding is too much, too fast. Administration should involve council in the development of an improved process. This complements work that's already being done by administration to engage with council to help craft the next orientation program. Recommendation number 3, That administration review onboarding, professional development, and training programming for council members' employees with input from council and their offices. Programming should include professional development and regular training offerings related to conflict management, psychological safety, and anti-racism. If we can deliver those kinds of supports to members of council, we should also extend those supports to their staff. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 4, that administration develop a mental health support strategy, including readily available and easily accessible counseling support services for council and their employees with input from council and their offices. The elected job is hard, but the staff job is difficult too. We want to make sure that sufficient mental health supports are being provided to both council and their staff. Administration is currently engaged in developing a corporate mental health strategy and have confirmed that members of council and their employees may be included in that work. Recommendation number 5, that administration prepare ward budget structure options for council's consideration to respond to the unique resource requirements among wards while maintaining a base budget allocation per ward, again with input from council and their offices. Wards are unique. The question for council is, should all the budgets be equal? Is there a formula that could be developed where additional resources could be allocated to wards with more development activity or more community associations or a variety of other inputs? Recommendation number 6, that administration develop a council member's office human resources strategy to address council member employee environment gaps with input from council and their offices. Staff find themselves in a challenging employment situation. Improvements could be made to how they receive human resource supports. Some of this work is already underway, but a cohesive strategy is required. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 7, that administration support members of council to establish a consistent and user-friendly format for City of Calgary council member web pages to present their vote record and rationale by topic. As well, administration should establish a link to council member vote records and rationale web pages from the council and committee meetings landing web page. The public want to know how you voted, and they want to know why you voted that way. We would suggest that improvements be made to the user experience of finding out how you vote on issues while leaving customizable areas for ward offices to provide context on the why as well. Recommendation number 8, that educational and communications programming be expanded to share clear information for the public about the roles and responsibilities of council and municipal government, as well as opportunities for public participation in city decision-making. Civic engagement is a constant challenge. Better informed citizens are a goal in any democracy. Improvements should be made to communication materials through the city to provide better and easier to access information for Calgarians. There's an opportunity to expand on work administration has done to improve Calgarians' experience when addressing council in a public hearing and educate them on how to participate in the decision-making process. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 9, that all citywide public opinion research undertaken or commissioned by administration be designed for and shared at the level of individual wards. This should include developing accessible and customizable data dashboards for use by council members' offices. City-level data is helpful, but we feel that ward-level data is even better. This tool would require the development of customizable data dashboards that could help ward offices analyze trends and data inputs specific to their communities. Administration currently issues ward-level opinion surveys on a number of products, but it is not the standard for everything that's being developed. Public dashboards related to 3-on-1 data are already available at the ward level, so we see reference options already available within that roster. Recommendation number 10, that administration develop a partnership with local post-secondaries or another suitable partner to carry out high-quality surveys of Calgarians' policy priorities and attitudes at least once per year. There are issues that are perhaps too political for city-level surveys, but delving into these topics can add tremendous value for council as they look to keep their finger on the pulse of their constituents. We have strong partners here in the city that could assist with high-quality surveys that could have a more political angle. Recommendation number 11, that administration commission 1 to 4 citizens' assemblies per term, each focused on an important and high-profile policy challenge. We think there is value in looking at some innovative engagement opportunities. Citizens' assemblies are one such tool that we are proposing that council explore. In the report, you can find some concrete examples of where citizens' assemblies have been utilized in other municipalities. Next slide, please. For future commission considerations, we are recommending that the next Ward Boundary Commission review and provide recommendations to council on the representational and organizational considerations related to the introduction of political parties and slates. Their work should include consultation with 2025 general election parties, slates, and candidates, administration, and other interested parties. We recognize there are a lot of external factors that impact council. This month alone, there have been a lot of conversations about the relationship with the provincial government. Changes to provincial legislation has opened the door for parties and slates in the next round of municipal elections. The Municipal Affairs Minister has framed this as being a pilot. We would suggest that a future commission be stood up to review this pilot and provide recommendations which could then be shared with the province. For our policy considerations, recommendation number 13 suggests that the next Ward Boundary Commission consider opportunities for council to share formal accountability for the unique representational needs of the downtown commercial core. Currently, downtown is largely served by a single councillor. We would suggest that a future commission look at some changes to guiding principles for ward boundaries that may look at dividing the downtown up among more wards. Currently, this would be at odds with some guiding principles that require communities to remain fully intact. Recommendation number 14, that the name of future commissions be referred to by their primary mandate, such as a review of ward boundaries, number of councillors, or effectiveness of the ward system. Our name is super confusing. This has come up in our engagement with the public and in our conversations with all of you. There should be more flexibility in the naming of future commissions. Those that deal with boundaries could obviously be ward boundary commissions. Those that deal with a governance review should be named something else. Recommendation 15, that the policy be amended to provide that a ward boundary commission be appointed to lead the review of all ward boundaries impacting communities, regardless of the number of wards that are requiring adjustments. Changes to boundaries that impact residents should always be led by an impartial boundary commission and not by administration. Even changes to balance a small number of wards will often have citywide impacts, as we've seen in the last redistribution. Minor technical or administrative adjustments to ward boundaries, which are required as a result of changes by annexation or community boundaries, should still be led by the city clerk's office. And lastly, and clerical of nature, that the policy be amended to remove section 6.1.2, total electors, and that the next Ward Boundary Commission examine the policy criteria to ensure continued relevance. Next slide, please. And I'm almost done, I promise. It's not lost on any member of the commission how difficult your roles are. What is before you is a menu of options. We believe these will add value, but the decision ultimately falls to council. This is not intended to be an all or nothing exercise, and we would encourage each recommendation to be considered on its individual merit. Some of these ideas may be ready to be activated now. Others will require further review and study. We welcome this as part of the process. Attachment 2 is administration's preliminary assessment of service and budget impacts. It includes current funded work complementing the Commission's recommendation and Class 5 budget estimates of funding required where available. Many recommendations will require further review and refinement, so budget and timing details are yet to be fully determined. Lastly, I would like to thank members of council for this opportunity for us to step up and serve our city and provide you with these recommendations today. I want to thank members of the public for their involvement. The topic, as I mentioned before, was fairly high level and fairly unique, and Calgarians certainly rose to that challenge to give us some really interesting feedback to consider. I also want to thank administration for supporting us, meeting with us, sharing their feedback. I do want to give a specific shout out to the clerk's team. I know they're the unsung heroes of all things that happen in these chambers, but I specifically want to recognize Andrew Brower, Janine Dryden, and Mary Kirk, who were there for us every step of the way in ensuring that this work got done at the standard that it did get done at. And lastly, I want to thank members of the commission. You gave this city the best of yourselves, and I want to thank all of you for your service. With that, I welcome the discussion and any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much for the presentation. We're going to go to questions, starting with Councillor Putmans.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Pinkster and your team. Great work. I've seen several of these reports, and they just keep getting better and better every time we produce one. So it occurred to me that your timing is perfect in the sense we just released the population increase from last year, earlier this week. With 69,000 more people, this work is really timely and very important. The notion of skills development, capacity building, those are very high-level professional things that we can do, and we can do fairly easily. So I appreciate it on that level as well. But I do have a bit of a challenge for you, though. You took a quote on page 11 of the report. There has to be more checks and balances on why, how councillors vote on issues that may contradict the will of their constituents. Who defines the constituents' will?
I think that's up to interpretation from council in terms of what that looks like. I mean, you're all faced with competing pressures and competing perspectives, and balancing those and finding out where majorities may lie, where vulnerable populations are impacted by that is one of the major challenges of this job.
This came up at a community event earlier this week, actually. I was at in the evening, and they wanted to know what guided our decision-making and who do we report to. So I explained a little bit about the fiduciary duty to the organization, which comes as a shock to most people. So there's also public education elements to this as well.
Yeah, and we referenced that in one of our recommendations about the need for those materials available through the City of Calgary website to be improved. Residents need to have easily accessible resources where they can find out where they can participate in the decision-making process, what the limitations of your roles are in terms of what you can decide upon and where you fit into that context as well.
Great, thank you again. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Penner.
Thank you. First, thank you, first of all, for moving the time that you were to present to us and being here with us tonight. Really appreciate that. One of the things that really struck me in the reporting and the data was the demographics, and that the demographics of those who responded are not actually indicative of the demographics of the city as a whole at this point in time. And so I'm wondering, of all of the tactics that you employed and used to reach out, is there anything you would do different to truly reach some of those underrepresented populations and those demographics that aren't equitably represented in what we saw respond?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Again, I referenced the difficulty of the topic that we were faced with here. It perhaps maybe wasn't the most accessible topic for everyone to be able to engage with through all of this. We took most of our direction in terms of the engagement tactics from the Engage team, and they were incredibly professional, incredibly helpful at every stage of this journey. I think we were very deliberate to try to make sure we showed up in all quadrants of the city. We deliberately spent time with identified groups that focused on a lot of those populations that you're talking about, whether they be ethnocultural or community level groups, to make sure we were casting as wide of a net as possible. I know our data at the end of this was not representative of a full population, but I do think there were some limitations just in terms of how we were able to reach people, just on the nature of the topic that we were faced with here.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that. May I just ask, I understand the commission is reporting. Are we able to also ask questions of administration just with respect to sort of the work and the budget implications on this?
Yes.
Great. So I just want to ask a couple questions of administration as we contemplate mid-cycle adjustments. I know that a lot of this work is for after the next election cycle. However, this budget takes us through even mid-cycle until after the next election. And so how is administration approaching that and building in some of these recommendations so that after election 2025, some of this can be immediately implemented?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So in attachment 2 of the report, it does lay out the service and budget impacts. And I think you can see from the way that the information is presented here, it mostly looks at it from the context of what budget is available currently as approved. It did not contemplate adding additional budget into the mid-cycle budget, but it does reference several points where complementary work could be, maybe it's already in the works, or could be supplemented to help support some of the efforts that of improvement that the Commission is recommending.
Thanks. I appreciate that answer, and I recognize that there's a significant amount of process change that is being recommended here, and so really important to note that the budget that follows that may not be immediately available. And so I think, what are the next steps in messaging out the progress and how of implementation on the recommendations if approved by Council?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Penner. I will weigh in. In terms of reporting back, we were very thoughtful in creating the attachment to show you the initiatives that we can certainly move forward. As Council is aware, we provide our reporting through mid-cycle adjustments on key performance measures. That's an area where we could be highlighting some of the initiatives that we're developing as part of the service plans and budgets, as part of the service delivery. So for example, the mayor and council line has been identified in a number of these recommendations. That would be an opportunity to report back. We also have opportunities where we update council on the work that administration is doing in our delivery of the various services. So whether that's on the human resources side, on the financial, on the budgeting, I think that would be an opportunity to give you those regular updates in terms of how we're moving this work forward. Can't commit to it in the moment, but my team and I are certainly exploring ways in which we can provide additional information on calgary.ca. That's an area that we could explore in tracking how some of these initiatives will be moving forward following council's following council's adoption of the recommendations. So a couple avenues. No formal report is in place, but I'm confident that with the team we can give you regular updates through the various channels.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I also wonder about the responsibility of council taking ownership on ensuring some of these initiatives are executed. And so as I contemplate, I haven't created anything formal, but what would be the role, if administration, I guess, was looking for a decision point on any of these, where would be their first committee touch point? Would you imagine it would be council services, executive? Where would you see this landing to help the work proceed forward, or for council at some point to take accountability either through committee initially to ensure that this work is proceeding?
That's an excellent question, Councillor Penner. I think that looking at the 16 recommendations, I think they actually could go to both Council Services Committee. For example, one of the recommendations does speak to councillors' ward office budgets, and that the mandate for the councillors' budgets and expense bylaw is within council services. But then on some of those administrative pieces, when it comes to the Ward Boundary Commission and the governance pieces, the mandate would be within the executive committee. So I think we can look at both committees depending on which one of the recommendations council adopts today and we move forward. But I do see a bit of flexibility in which committee the recommendations would go to.
Thanks. And I think then my last question is, and I know this is like partly a question for us as councillors, but from an administrative standpoint, do you believe there is specific council direction needed to report back through either committee, be it executive or be it council services, based on the nature of the recommendation, on a set timeline or basis? Would administration benefit from that direction, or are you comfortable leaving it as an open-ended conversation?
Councillor Penner, I will speak to the items that are directed to the City Clerk's office, and then I will look to my colleagues in administration, as there are other service lines that are impacted by these recommendations. From my perspective, once council decides which one of these 16 recommendations you would like to adopt today, that is my direction, and I don't feel that we would benefit from specific report back. I'm confident and comfortable giving you my commitment that I would bring back any one of those 16 recommendations that are directed to me, and that I would come to council, whether that's a budget request or whether it's to committee, if we found ourselves in such a spot that we would require additional guidance or direction from council. But I will ask my colleagues from the other service lines to weigh in as well.
Excuse me. Thanks, Ms. Martin, for the opportunity. I do observe and recognize that several of the services within People, Innovation and Collaboration Services have worked very closely with clerks, particularly in the past few years, with respect to supporting council and council staff as we evolve through the changing demands on councillors. So I know that we continue to expect that we would like to work collaboratively with clerks to support council and council members and your teams And probably if we keep it more open and able to bring back information as it becomes more aware to us and as we better understand the scope of those pieces of work, we would be happy to keep that dialogue open with council.
Great, thanks. I'll leave it for now and save for some debate.
Okay, great, because your time's up too. Let's go to Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Councillor Penner asked one of my questions. I'm just going to kind of ask some questions based on the ones that I'm not really happy about, and you know which ones those are. But the one issue I have with the budget, based on research, do other municipalities look at ward to ward and increase budget compared to other? So, you know, like my ward budget being different than like Councillor Wong's ward. Is that normal or?
We haven't seen examples in other jurisdictions of that. I know this recommendation in particular was a theme that came up in a lot of our interviews with councillors that were reflecting that populations being similar does not tell the whole story in terms of workload, in terms of different things that are happening. We put that recommendation in here to drive a conversation with council in terms of what you thought might be most appropriate in terms of tackling those challenges.
Okay, and then I'm going to jump to number 7 when it talks about the established content of a user-friendly web page. And right now, we have the ability to use the resources the city has, and we can frame it all which way we want. But don't you feel like that's the onus of the councillor elected official to really brand themselves? And like some of this, and I know you had that conversation with me, I had a tough time with this report, being an ex-administrator, saying I think that there's not enough of a line drawn between administration and council. And I'll get to number 1 in a second, but don't you think that, the website thing, I think if the city can provide a platform that it's all consistent, so there's no like IT issues, why the rationale around this though? Like, can you explain more? Yeah. Like, was this like no one understood?
What we're finding is it's just incredibly hard to navigate. That if someone wants to go through and find out councillors' voting record on a number of issues, you're pouring through reams and reams of minutes that aren't particularly well organized, that are very hard to work your way through. We think there's a logical landing spot on the council webpage that outlines meetings, minutes, webcasts, your profile pages that could include some augmented information on a one-stop shop for voting records that could be sortable by a variety of topics, by a variety of different things through all of that to make that experience for those that are searching for that information a little bit more streamlined.
And I understand that. And I think again, like comes back to us to be able to provide that to our constituents because, we have to provide the why. And I just think if you don't want to do that, then that's on you. Yeah. And if you want to do it, great. And I think it's up to the member of council to do that. My opinion, number 1, this one I have a really big problem with, and in a lot of ways. So I have a problem with how do you think reports can actually be structured across the departments, like from, let's say it's a planning issue, but that planning issue touches like parks and rec and waste and recycling. How is a report like that going to get streamlined in an orderly fashion when everybody's at capacity during election time to be prepped in a binder for a handoff? Walk me through that situation.
Yeah. We've suggested this be something to be considered, to look into what that continuity planning could look like from office to office. There would obviously need to be some degree of centralization, whether that be in the CAO's office or some other body, to pull all that information in together. We really use this as a reference point on what we see at the provincial and federal levels of government. And I understand the capacities are incredibly different at those orders. They have mechanisms in which they can pull that information together. Now, it is focused on a singular ministry, so the task is a little bit easier on that. Our goal on this was to provide that benchmark, that starting point for a new councillor coming in to understand across the organization what are those initiatives locally that are being worked on, what are the key stakeholders that are being engaged through all of that. We deliberately did not prescribe who should be responsible for pulling that information in together. I think there's some further study and review that could be went into the best way perhaps to do this. We strictly looked at this as a precedence being at other orders that should be duplicated and brought here locally as well.
Okay, maybe, Mayor, I'm just going to get into a quick debate and then I won't get back myself in the queue. Is that okay? Just because I'll be quick. I just want to say thank you so much. I know this is a lot of work. So everyone that you had thanked, I'm not going to repeat, but I know you're all sitting there and thanks for being so patient with us today. I know we bumped you around a little bit. A few of these concern me. We've had that open-ended conversation. I have asked clerks to bundle the ones that I would like called separately. The reason I feel that they concern me and the ones that will be pointing out is that I actually think they cause a little bit additional red tape. And I know that as a newly elected official, you come into this role and you do drink out of the fire hose. Sorry, that's your job. You got to figure it out. And you have to figure it out based on what you heard while you were door knocking too. So maybe the person that was sitting in that role before might have this wonderful binder ready for you, and that is nothing you heard on the doorstep. So I think, there's got to be some sort of balance, and that's how I look at this. But I also think that administration is strapped for time and efforts and everything else, and throwing any more work on them to support us is going to be tough. So with that, that's my debate, and clerks will bring up the ones I'd like to vote against. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Thaliwal.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for all the great work, and thank you to the Commission. Just a couple of questions. I'll keep it very brief. The first one is 16 recommendations. I can't remember. They're all equally weighted. There are like 14 councillors, so I'm assuming there were 14 different opinions, very much. Because did you go back to our office? I can't remember. I just want to, and presented all 16 and ask them to weight them and kind of tell them which are the biggest priorities, because it's going to be hard to achieve all 16, and there's going to be councillors disagreeing with some of these.
Yeah, the session that we hosted with council in July, we had a few additional recommendations that were on this, that we did receive feedback from some members of council that for practical reasons, for implementation purposes, maybe weren't fits in terms of what we were actually pitching through all of this. So we really thought it was important to create that opportunity to get that feedback, to get some insights from you on what might be the best recommendations versus recommendations that didn't work beyond that. We tried to work as hard as we could to keep you informed every stage of the journey, but we did not come back to offices specifically and say 1 through 16, please provide us with weighting. We went forward with the strongest recommendations that we thought in terms of the themes that we built, the feedback that we heard, the information that we collected during this process.
Great. Thank you, because you guys did an amazing work, and now some people just saying they don't like this. It hurts me, right? Because all the great work you guys have done, Okay, my last question is 803 participants. Most of them were online people filling in these surveys?
Sorry, you're referencing how many people submitted to the survey?
Attachment 4, yeah. What we heard, there was like these questions that you guys have laid out, and 803 participants, you had 786 responding, and so on and so on. This was mostly online?
Correct. Yeah, there was an online survey that was available for, I believe, a period of 7 weeks on the Engage webpage. There were questions that we developed in concert with the Engage team to ask some of those open-ended questions, but also have some specific weighting that went into that as well. And then there were opportunities for sure for some verbatim comments, but also the pop-in sessions. So,
and when were these 7 weeks, please?
I'm trying to remember the timing. I'm wondering if someone from Engage could remind me of the specific timing of when we were in market on this.
It's because I just want to understand the perspective. Like, I just want to understand when this timing was, because we had a really big event in this May public hearing. And what I'm seeing is scientifically that people who are saying that they don't agree that their perspectives are reflected in council's decision strongly disagree at 553. And when you look at other surveys, most of them, I'm assuming, are those who are engaged, who are keeping, who are trying to reach their council's office. So I just want to understand scientifically if that correlation makes sense.
Yeah, so I think I know the specific issue that you might be referencing, and our engagement was happening right in the midst of all of that. So it was in March and April of this year is when we were in market with that.
Great, thank you. That's it. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you, Mayor. Again, great work.
Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Meehan, please.
Yeah, thank you so much to the Commission. This is very thorough. Councillor Craw and I were talking about how you're a very keen group to come up with 16 recommendations is a lot. It does violate some of the standard protocol to never give councillors more than plus or minus 3 recommendations at a time, maybe 5.
A bunch of nerds.
He did. I changed it to keeners, but this is all really good work, and it's hard to take issue too much with any single one. But when we cross-reference with how we would exactly resource them and the timelines for that, this gets very complicated incredibly fast. Councillor Penner and I have been typing in the background about what to do with this, and maybe to refer it to a committee to have further discussion, to bring it to council at this level. I think that you're right, Councillor Dhaliwal. People are going to vote against certain ones, and that's their right. But I still worry that we actually pass all 16, but then actually resource none of them when push comes to shove at the budget. So I think we maybe need to sit with this a little bit longer. And so I guess my question to clerks or to administration is, in the event we accepted these recommendations, is the resourcing process separate, and would that decision then come at budget, or exactly what would we be approving here?
The recommendations set out further work, and some of them may require additional budget. So then there would be separate decision-making around that. So it's hard to sort of paint a clear picture of how this, all of these recommendations will carry through. Several of them are already complementary or in progress, so there is work that way. I think the city clerk mentioned as well that depending upon the nature of the recommendation, there would be further reporting anyway, but there would be a lot of these that would require further analysis. So I think the intent of the commission is, as the chair mentioned, is to set it in course some improvement areas, and then through incremental over time, then you see the outcome of that.
Just the one thing that I would add to that is the commission really focused on the what and less on the how for a lot of this. It was about presenting what we thought were starting points for conversations in terms of where some of these issues could be addressed. We're not experts in terms of how the city's being run, in terms of capacity within specific departments, in terms of functionally how would that get pulled together. So a lot of our recommendations do specifically point out a need to review further or a need for study or to look into something to find those finer details.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. I think given that, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Councillor Penner, who has an alternate. So I'll pass it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. And before we go to Councillor Penner to move the alternate, Councillor Wong, do you have questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Pinkston, and thank you to the Commission for coming forward with these recommendations. With regards to number one, I will say that when I first came on board, I really did appreciate Councillor Farrell for leaving behind a cheat sheet of the 12 things that I should think about. But beyond that, there was no context because my office was empty. So I had to then figure out, okay, so what do these all mean? And fortunately, as Councillor Sharp said, draw back on your campaigning, what the people said to you. So that was good. Having said that, though, I'm not sure exactly when you say administration engage with the councillor's office to draw that reference for the next councillor, what that really looks like. Is there a template? Is there a survey? Is it top 10 things? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not sure what that looks like. So it's a commentary, but and I think it's a challenge for administration to figure out how to do that. Because again, every ward office is different. Every ward office has different demographics, profile, issues on hand. Some are citywide, some are very local. So I'm not sure exactly what that template or the administrative process would be there. The second was number 8 there, the education and communication programming to expand to share clear information with the public. I think one of the things that we're challenged with many times over is that when we deliberate things, the public don't always understand the nuances of everything that we consider as we debate, as we go into closed session, as we read reports and this and that. And again, I think that's probably one of the godsends out of this is that how do we get our constituents out there to really appreciate the nuances of what we do and the complexities, and sometimes the obvious answer isn't the obvious answer. I'd be curious to know how it is we can educate 1.5 million Calgarians in there, but I think it is one of those things that works really well. Number 12 there about the next ward boundary commission provide recommendations to representation organization as it relates to political parties and slates. And I'm not sure, and I'm going to apologize, I didn't dive right into the full report. Was that intended to be done before or after the 25 election?
After
the election.
We're looking at this and saying we need to have an understanding of from an operational standpoint, from a functionality standpoint, how has this changed the game? How is this impacting the way things are being done now versus the way things were done previously? Again, we really focused on the language from the province on this, of this being a pilot. And if there is a pilot, there should be some kind of feedback loop attached to said pilot. And we think this would be the right instrument in terms of finding that out. Okay. And the last one was number 13, with the obvious one about downtown commercial core. You and I had a conversation about that. And I think just to express myself to the rest of the colleagues, we all benefit from the downtown core. We all have input, both in terms of constituents, visitors, businesses, everything else in there. But I'm not sure if what you meant by that was to share the understanding of it or to share the responsibility for it. We were talking more physical boundaries. The way the guiding principles within the policy are written right now, you can't divide up individual communities amongst numerous wards. That was corrected through recent ward boundary commissions. We're suggesting that if council would have an appetite in looking at dividing downtown up physically and having more wards represented in that geographical area, there would be some consideration on changing those guiding principles, because you would automatically be violating keeping communities intact through that same process. So we're again suggesting this could be something that could be considered. We didn't feel that we had a mandate to be looking into that. We're suggesting that a future commission could.
I would say that's your Rubik's Cube and trying to figure that out, because, you know, there's a lot of complexity, and dispersing accountability for it is difficult.
Yeah, the map I mentioned, we weren't playing with maps obviously in this mandate. It is being projected that boundary redistribution may be required after the 2025 election. So I think this next stage of this conversation probably comes pretty quickly over the next couple of years here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Penner for an alternate.
Thanks. I believe Clerks has this. And so what I'm hearing from my colleagues, and I think perhaps rather than breaking it apart, what I hear is a desire, and let me try this again. I hear the desire to have further conversations both amongst ourselves and with administration with respect to the recommendations and the implications, either financial or social, that may, or political, that may come from it. And so what I'm going to propose as an alternate recommendation is that Council receives the report and recommendations from the Ward Boundary Commission, and that we ask Council Services Committee to review them and provide a list of recommendations for implementation to Council no later than the end of Q2 2025. And so what this would do is allows, again, for a little bit more robust conversation, a little bit more time for digestion. And then I think it also, though, gives us a timeline in advance of the next election. So if there are things that need to be implemented, we can work towards that. But then I understand that a lot of this, again, is going to continue. This is an ongoing and continuous conversation. So this doesn't then abandon any of the recommendations of the commission today, but rather allows for future contemplation. I kind of just kept going there. Clerks, I'm not sure if you have the recommendation for everyone to see.
We do, Councillor Penner. We'll just have that shared on Teams so you could see it as well, but the recommendation is up.
Thanks so much. And then respecting that some of these are asks of other administrative bodies, then Council would be able to give direction to those when it would come through Council by the end of Q2 2025. So open to hearing what everyone has to say, and of course looking for a seconder, and I think Councillor Meehan might second it, but I won't speak for her.
So looking for a seconder, Councillor Meehan, thank you. Councillor Demong.
I totally agree with the direction you want to go with this, but doesn't this set us up for a mandatory reconsideration vote at the stage where it goes to Q2? If we accept all of these recommendations from the Ward Boundary Commission, take another look at them at the Council Services Committee, and then decide which ones to go forward with, it would cause a reconsideration requirement. Am I correct, Kirks?
Potentially, it depends on what the Council Services Committee would bring back. Perhaps where the change could be made would be to leave it at that Council accept the report of the Ward Boundary Commission, but not commit to accepting the recommendations. I believe that's where you're going.
That's exactly where I'm going, because even the slightest change, even if one of these 16 decides not to go forward after Council Services, it will require a supermajority. So I would
Councillor Demong, I will take that as a friendly.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm done.
General consent, Mayor?
All right, I don't see anybody else in the queue. So let's go back over to you, Councillor Penner. Oh, hang on, Councillor Craw.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that it'd be nice if we could thank the Ward Boundary Commission as part of the official thing, but we can also just say thank you so much for your incredible work, nerds.
I would take that council thank and accept the report as a friendly.
We're just capturing that. Okay, Councillor Chabot.
Yeah, I wanted to actually see it in writing because I'm always cautious when I'm voting on something to make sure that I know exactly what I'm voting on. So happy to see that recommendation. Yeah, I think Council Services Committee is the appropriate place to send this. There are some things that I'm challenged with here in this report for a number of different reasons, and without getting into them in great detail right now, I'm more than happy to have a more robust discussion amongst my colleagues, look at allocating the appropriate resources to make sure that we do that, whatever we do it right. So happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so Councillor Penner, let's just make sure that everything is written as you had intended. And I'll turn to you to close.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to my colleagues. But really importantly, thank you to the Ward Boundary Commission for the time they have taken as citizen members on this project, and recognizing that while no two opinions on council are ever the same, when you really get into it, no two opinions of the public are often the same either. And so how we do this work and balance it going forward and have those conversations with the public is super important. And I thank you for the work you've done in highlighting some of the challenges that our offices are expressing to you, but the frustrations then that those challenges are also, we're seeing them mirrored with the public in trying to advance the work of the city. So thank you for that. And thank you to council for considering this alternate recommendation. I hope you can support it so we can continue the conversation.
Thank you. You're closed. Let's go to eScribe to vote.
Mayor Gonda, all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for your patience today, everyone. Appreciate it. All right, Madam Clerk, we are now going back to consent agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct, Mayor Gondak, and the first item that we are returning to is item 7.1.1.
Okay.
And that was the procedural motion that I spoke about earlier. Given that that was very early this morning, perhaps I'll just give a super quick overview. We're looking to file the procedural motion with respect to item 7.1.1. That was a procedural request to add the Confluence as a location for the September 23rd Indigenous Focus Council meeting. The rationale for this motion is simply this was placed on council's agenda during the planning session. As the plans unfolded, it was determined that the procedural motion was no longer required. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And in a nutshell, we're going to be able to hold that meeting not only in chambers, but we're going to be able to go to the Confluence, which is going to be incredibly meaningful for everyone, not just those of us on council, but to the members of the Indigenous community that have taken the time to be with us that day. So can I get a mover for this, please? Councillor Meehan, thank you. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Spencer, thank you. I don't see anybody in the queue, so let's go to eScribe to vote.
Councillor Corral, your vote, please. Thank you. Mayor Gonda, call the vote. Mayor Gonda, all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? That's carried unanimously. Let's go to item 7.7. Was it Councillor Winus that pulled this one? Okay.
Yeah, that was me. And clerks has the updated resolution. We're just going to make this report go public in January 2nd, 2025.
Okay, can I get a seconder on this one? Councillor McLean? All right, I don't see anybody in the queue for any kind of debate. Over to you to close, Councillor Winus.
Yeah, after this report came through audit, we saw that it would be good information for Calgarians to see given the issues we've been having with mowing and community concerns. And so I just think it's important that we show this report to the public for the next round of mowing and show that if it isn't working, we can tell Calgarians that we have been investigating this and are looking to be transparent about the efforts we have put in as a council to make this program better.
And with that, you're closed, so we will go to e-scribe to vote.
Mayor Gonta, call the vote.
Thank you. Oh, not yet.
Excuse me. Oh, Councillor Penner, I see that you're back, so we've opened up the vote to you.
Yes.
Thank you. Now all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? That's carried unanimously. And then we are on to 7.9. Councillor, oh, hold on. Yep,
That was just the amendment, Mayor Gondek. We now need to go back to the main motion as amended.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right. Main motion is amended, moved by Councillor Wyness, seconded by Councillor McLean. Anything to add, Councillor Wyness?
No, sorry, I had already switched to e-scribe. No.
Okay, let's go to e-scribe to vote.
Councillor Sharp is absent. Oh, I'm sorry. I saw.
It's okay.
Vote.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Gondek, all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? It's carried unanimously. 7.9, Councillor Wong, was that yours?
Yes, it is, Mayor. At the infrastructure, I can't remember which committee it came forward, this came forward originally, but long story short, there was a conversation relative to using monies from the reserve going to fiscal reserve, now fiscal stabilization reserve. Given the conversations we had today with regards to Green Line, CFO mail, has that changed your perspective as to whether all that reserve should be going to FSR or could it be made available at mid-cycle adjustment?
Thank you, Councillor Wong. One of the recommendations is to preserve all the budget amounts for Green Line to go to Green Line. I think we heard earlier today that our financial position, we're going to know a whole lot more in the coming months as to responsibilities and the like. What I also know from the budget documents from yesterday is that between community services being able to accommodate some of the downtown leadership table recommendations and the additional administrative recommendations, which is the balance of the recommendations, there is a plan for a recommendation for funding between those two things to fund that initiative entirely. So my suggestion right now is that all decisions be made at the budget time. We will know more information in November when it comes to Green Line, I hope. And we have direction to integrate some of the Green Line decision-making into that.
So just to clarify that the Downtown Safety Leadership Table is funded as part of the recommendations, the 0.89%, is that right?
Correct. So between the funding that was found by community services by reprioritizing, reallocating, and reductions in other areas, as well as within the recommendation, the 0.89, it's included in the 0.89% for the operating budget. There is also a plan for the one-time funds.
Great, thank you. Mayor, I had previously sent to members of council a possible motion arising. I've withdrawn that only because it will be done as an administrative inquiry. Thank you.
Excellent. Can we get you to move the item then? Can we get you to move the item then? Yes, of course. Thank you. Councillor Chabot, you're going to second it? I don't see anybody in the queue with debate. Closed, Councillor Wong? All right, e-scribe to vote, please.
Councillor Wong, your vote, please. Thank you. Mayor Gonta, all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? That's carried unanimously. Madam Clerk, if I'm not mistaken, we're moving to our two last items, which are both in closed session.
You're correct, Mayor.
Okay, so 12.2.3, which is the update on new franchise agreements, and 12.3.1, which has a name that I'm looking for. update on use of recreational vehicles. Those are going to be able to be in closed session. You can see the motion before you. Councillor Meehan to move it, seconded by Councillor Wong. Thank you. I don't see anybody looking for debate. Let's go to e-scribe to vote.
Councillor McLean, your vote, please. Yes. Thank you. Mayor Gondek, all the votes are in.
Thank you. Could you display the results, please? That's carried 12-1 with Councillor Chu voting against. We will go into closed session, and when we finish, we'll come back to rise and report.
The regular meeting of council will be resuming in public session shortly. Please make your way back to chamber.
Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. On the roll, Councillor Wyness.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Carra.
I'm here.
Councillor Chabot.
Present.
Councillor Chu. Councillor Demong. Councillor Dhaliwal. Councillor McLean. Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Penner.
Here.
Councillor Pootmans.
Here.
Councillor Sharp.
Here.
Councillor Spencer.
Here.
Councillor Walcott. Councillor Wong. And Mayor Gondek.
I'm here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Motion to rise without reporting. Councillor Spencer, seconded by Councillor McLean. Anyone opposed to rising without reporting? Seeing and hearing none, that is carried. Madam Clerk, procedurally, we will need to either end the meeting now or extend it. So I'm looking for a motion from somebody. Councillor Wong. Can you use your mic, please?
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting until conclusion tonight. Thank you.
So the motion is up there to suspend this section.
Yes, as stated there. Thank you.
Perfect. Who would like to second that? Councillor Pootmans, thank you. All right, please go to eScribe to vote.
Councillor Dhaliwal, your vote, please. Yes. Councillor Chu, your vote, please. Yes. Councillor Pootmans, your vote, please.
Yes.
Councillor Wong, your vote, please. Councillor Demong, your vote, please. Yes. Councillor Chabot, your vote, please.
Yes.
Councillor Spencer, your vote, please. Yes. Councillor McLean, your vote, please.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan, your vote,
Yes.
please. Thank you, Mayor Gondek. All the votes are in.
Could you display the results, please? That's carried 12-1 with Councillor Wyness voting against.
I didn't, my vote didn't go, I didn't get to vote.
Oh, apologies, Mayor. Can we rescind it and recast?
We can rescind and recast, and this time I'll just do a voice vote. How about that? If that would be okay, Madam Clerk?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll just wait for it to come back on the screen. It is to suspend a section of the bylaw that will allow us to finish the item, the last item that's before us. There it is. It's coming right back. There it is. Is there anyone opposed to this?
Councillor Winus is opposed.
Councillor Sharp.
Councillors Winus and Sharp are opposed, and that is carried. Madam Clerk, do we now need the motion to go back into closed?
Before we do, Your Worship, we have some members here that were here for a previous item, and I think we can dispose of it quickly. Can we do that so that they can then go home?
I didn't bring any of my stuff, but sure, let's wing it. It's 12.2.1.
12.2.3, Mayor Gondek.
Okay.
And the motion was to be moved by Councillor Chabot and seconded by Councillor Demong.
Okay. I need the bylaws. Yep, got it.
I'm happy to introduce the motion, which is to move forward with a new franchise agreement on NMAX. It's been publicly advertised. The net result is it will be a savings for Calgarians on what they pay in franchise fee, and it's predictable. So happy to move the recommendations, and I believe first reading of the bylaw.
Yes. There's only one motion on the recommendations, correct?
I'm just double checking it, Mayor. So the recommendations for this was to give first reading to bylaw 42M 2024. That is correct. That is the motion that's contained in administration's report.
Okay. So anything else to add, Councillor Chabot?
I'm closed.
Thank you. E-scribe to vote, please.
I'm sorry? No, you didn't. Mayor, apologies, we weren't ready for this item coming out of closed. Just need to cast the vote first with respect to.
You know what, Councillor Chabot, I appreciate what you're trying to do. We're not going to do this right now. We're going to vote to go back into closed session. All of us are going to get our materials and come back out here and vote on it properly. We're not rushing this through. Madam Clerk, we'll take the motion to go into closed session, please. Can I get a mover and a seconder for this, please? Councillor Wong, seconded by Councillor Meehan. I'm going to voice vote on this. Anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, it is carried. We're into closed session.